Thank you. Welcome to the Monday, April 17th meeting of the Wayzata Planning Commission. I hereby call the meeting to order. My name is Larissa Stockton. I'm the chair of the Planning Commission. I have a few words about how to participate in this evening's meeting. Members of the public may attend this Planning Commission meeting in person while they provide all the city policies and protocols related to the pandemic. They can also have joined by Zoom with the meeting ID code 880-2598-5707, passcode 843194. Members of the public may watch and listen remotely by viewing the meeting on Channel 8 WCTV and the city's website at wayzata.org/WCTV. Public comment during the public forum and/or public hearing portions of the meeting may be provided in person at the meeting, in advance, or by logging into the Zoom call and raising your hand during the public hearing. When your name is called in the meeting, you will be seen and heard in our council chambers and the cable channel. You'll be asked to unmute, and then you may begin your comment. All public comments must include your full name and address. The city encourages comments or questions about items on the agenda, and when possible, requests that you submit them in advance by emailing publiccomments@wayzata.org, calling the city staff at 952-404-5323, or mailing Wayzata Hall, City Hall at 600 Rice Street East, Wayzata, Minnesota 55391. Attention, public comment. Great, now we can go ahead and take a roll call. Director Gellner?
Yes, Commissioner Schwalbe.
Here.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Here.
Commissioner Douglas.
Here.
Chair Stockton.
Here.
Commissioner Severson.
Here.
And Chair, please note that Commissioner Merriam and Elg are absent this evening.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is approval of tonight's meeting agenda. Does anyone have any questions or proposed changes to the agenda? Okay, if not, may I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved, Douglas.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Douglas and Severson. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The motion passes, and the agenda is approved. Next, we have the items, the agenda, Next on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda. This evening's consent agenda consists of two items. A, approval of meeting minutes of April 3rd, 2023, and B, approval of the Planning Commission report and recommendation for approval of zoning text amendments to definitions and performance requirements chapters. Does any commissioner have any questions or comments on any item of the consent agenda, or want to pull anything for further discussion? Okay, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Sorensen. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Douglas. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The motion passes, and the consent agenda is approved. Okay, we'll move on to public hearing items. This evening, we have three. The first of which is A, consider application for design deviations for rooftop mechanical equipment at 900 Wayzata Boulevard East. Community Director, we want to take us through that?
I will pass the torch over to Planner Quarles for the presentation.
Thank you, Planner Quarles.
Thank you. Tonight we'll be talking about a project that most of you, actually all of you tonight have seen before, over at 900 Wayzata Boulevard East. The project is also known as Wayzata Gateway. And the application in front of us tonight is a little bit more narrow than the one we would have considered about last year, and it's just for rooftop mechanical equipment. For some background, this was a mixed-use redevelopment project that was approved in 2022. It was for a residential building with apartments and townhomes. You can see that along the south side. An office building, which you can see on the corner there, and then a bank with drive-through service, which is that smallest building. At the time, the approved plans did not include detailed mechanical equipment information. If you recall, at that time, I think we were working through something along the lines of 13 requests at once, and so we worked through all of that at the time. For some background, the surrounding neighborhood is generally residential, but has a pretty big variety of zoning districts. The three zoning districts that are squared are the ones that this parcel will become when the subdivision is completed: R5, C1, and C3. For your reference, this is the most current site plan we have for the project. The parcel in the middle up there, labeled 1, is what we call the bank parcel, and it's zoned C3. The one on the corner, parcel 2, is C1. And then, of course, that large yellow parcel is R5. The first two are bolded because the requests that we're considering tonight are just for those bank and office buildings. We're not considering anything to do with the residential building at this time. So just for that context. In terms of land use, this particular parcel is mixed use, commercial residential. There's a pretty big variety of land use guidances around here, but notably, and we'll come back to this later, there are 2 parcels to the north that are guided mixed use, commercial residential. And then a quick aerial view of the current building for your reference, as well as a street view. The application requests in front of us are for the office building. They're looking for design standards deviations for rooftop mechanical equipment. So this is stuff like HVAC, air conditioning, heating, cooling, all of those types of things. The idea for the office building is that there would be 3 units, and the deviations sought are for oversized footprint of mechanical equipment and oversized height. Similarly, the bank building has 5 units on top of it. Those are a lot smaller, but they still are both oversized in terms of footprint and oversized in terms of height. For additional context, these are design standards deviations, which are something that this group has considered quite a lot in the past, but not something that we typically consider by itself. It's usually wrapped up in a larger project. So I thought I'd take the opportunity to talk a little bit about the context of the design standards and how different areas of town regulate this particular rooftop mechanical issue differently. In the Lake Street District and in the Bluff District, which is in yellow, we don't really allow any rooftop mechanical equipment at all. Pretty strict about that. Typically what we're looking for new buildings to do in that case is design it into the building somehow, whether that's on the ground or tucked into one of the upper floors. You'll see buildings on Lake Street that have notches cut out. There are all sorts of innovative solutions that we've seen. The idea being that you should be able to generally stand on, the top of the hill and overlook Lake Street and not have to look at a ton of mechanical equipment. At Wayzata Boulevard, we don't necessarily have the issue of looking over the hill towards the lake quite as much, and so we relaxed our rooftop equipment standards a little bit. The standards here are that you can have mechanical equipment units on the roof with smaller footprints. The idea being that maybe you have something the size of like a residential AC unit or something like that, maybe multiple of those, but nothing too imposing or large. This was a pretty contentious portion of the design standards discussion that I wasn't present for, but I know a lot of you were, so I am sure that will be part of the discussion. In terms of our standards, the mechanical equipment height limitation in this design district is 3 feet. For the office, they're proposing units that are about 6 feet tall, so double that. And then at the bank, units that are not that much bigger, just about 3.5 feet, but still ones that require a deviation. For square footage, we're looking for mechanical units that are 3 by 3 feet, so for a total of 9 square feet. These are not really what's on the office and bank or what's proposed. In total, the mechanical equipment footprints on the office come up to about 500 square feet. One of those is 302 square feet, and then 2 other units are 99 square feet. I will have pictures for all of this. I just want to make sure we have the numbers straight. And then on the bank building, again, it's those 5 units, but they're a lot smaller. So it's just those 5 24 square foot units instead of the larger ones. We also have standards related to mechanical equipment percentage of the roof that can be covered and how it relates to the building height and how the height of the mechanical equipment relates to the building height. This is compliant in all of those ways. So we're really just focusing on just the height of the mechanical equipment itself and the square footage. So for the office building, all of these renderings are intended to be renderings in which the mechanical equipment has been placed on top of the office building. There's also screening. And if you might notice, you can only see the mechanical equipment in 2 of these renderings. The top one and then the one at the bottom center of the screen are both intended to be from street level. The top one being from Wayzata Boulevard, sort of the corner of Wayzata and Superior, and then the bottom being from as you're standing down the hill. And they've rendered these out to show that you can't see the mechanical equipment from the ground. If you were to see it, you would see screening that's generally made out of, I believe it's metal, and then painted white to match the building, again, to blend in. That central unit, as I mentioned, is about 300 square feet and 6 feet 1 inch tall. And then those two units to the side are 99 square feet each and the same height. I mentioned that screening, it's painted the color limestone. And then notably the height from grade plane, and you'll remember grade plane being a very important part of the discussion the last time we talked about this because this site is on such an extreme slope. The height from grade plane is 39 feet, 11 inches, the limit is 40. So very, very, very close. Part of the discussion that we went through as we finalized this separate development application for the Planning Commission was where exactly that grade plane is, because that becomes very important. There was an adjustment to the grade plane as part of finalizing all of the architectural plans. There were, basically what it was just a more precise way of calculating it, and I'm happy to get into the nitty-gritty of it, but long story short, staff approves of the way that they've decided to calculate the grade plane in this case, and so that particular measure complies. We did talk through a lot of alternative locations for the rooftop mechanical equipment. We looked at the ground, potentially the interior, whether that's the interior of the parking garage or some other part of the building, maybe creating some sort of inset to the roof. But there were issues that arose with all of those. Some of those relating to, tenancy in the space and square footages that are available, and others relating to the approvals that we already made. If you recall, there was a CUP for shared parking that would have to be adjusted. And if you also recall, there's a property line that skates right by the southern edge of this building. Any mechanical equipment on the ground would have required a setback variance. So part of the discussion was that we realized with this was that there was going to be some sort of public approval process either way. So at that point, it became up to the applicant of, you're gonna have to come up in front of the Planning Commission. What do you feel is the best thing to put in front of them, given that there's really no avoiding a public process? For the bank building, this is a little bit more standard. You'll see this on plenty of buildings. It's these 5 smaller units with 1 big screening enclosure. Again, they've included renderings that show that you can't really see it from the street, and not a lot to add there. I mentioned the screening before. It matches the office building. I will reiterate again that these ones are a lot shorter. They're only about 3.5 feet tall, so they're really only in seeking a deviation of about 6 inches from our 3-foot limit for mechanical equipment. Again, considering what the alternative locations are, this one is actually a lot tougher because if you recall, there's a lot going on this parcel. The drive-through runs very close. There are sidewalks on all sides. There's already some mechanical equipment on the ground already, and so the roof was considered really the only viable option for this space. The design standards do give additional notes and equipment. Some of these are from the code itself, and some of these are from the design standards handbook that was created as part of the design standards work. It notes that if you do have necessary equipment, it should be located in a place where it doesn't detract from the architecture. If there is large and bulky equipment on the roof, it should really be concealed from public view as much as possible, and be clustered in the least visually obtrusive locations. And that any equipment larger than these standards, meaning that 3 feet by 3 feet, 3 feet tall, larger than those standards should be located or must be located in the building interior or on grade in the side or rear yard, typo there, and concealed from view. So this is the one thing that they're seeking that deviation for. They've done the best they can to meet those other 3 bullets, but they're seeking a deviation from the 4th in spirit. So in terms of your questions for consideration, what you should be thinking through is whether this proposed rooftop mechanical equipment on each building fits the vision and policies of the comp plan. Does it permit greater conformity with other code standards or city policies? Are there applications that they're avoiding by going this route? And does it potentially have an overall positive effect on the area? In terms of the specific location of the proposed equipment, does it alleviate an undue burden of some kind, or does it better accommodate future possible uses near the property? And then finally, do the achievements that are enabled by this proposed equipment outweigh the negative impact of what is a significant deviation from these rooftop mechanical limitations on Wayzata Boulevard? A little bit of housekeeping. Everybody was noticed appropriately. We don't require a public meeting for design deviations only. And at this point, we haven't gotten any written public comments on this application. So our next steps is whether you have any questions for staff, we'll have our public hearing, you'll have your discussion. and then we'll have a motion, which is all written out and ready to go for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Planner Quarles. Do we have any clarifying questions for staff at this time? Commissioner Sorensen?
Yeah, Chair, could someone just maybe explain on the footprint requirement of 9 square feet? Like, how was that determined, or what was the real rationale of something that size?
I'll reiterate again that I did not have the privilege of being present for the design standards discussion. But from how I understand it, when you consider a piece of mechanical equipment that is that size, that sort of 3-foot cube, what you're generally looking at is something that's about the size of a residential AC unit. So this is something that would probably apply pretty well to maybe small multifamily buildings being built along Wayzata Boulevard, things like that. And I think it made sense to have some sort of alleviation for these small, fairly non-obtrusive units there, but really nothing bigger. The idea was that if you have substantial mechanical equipment, you should be tucking it into your building as much as possible or getting it out of view as much as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions?
I don't know if this is a question for you or the applicant, but do we know the height of the current Wells Fargo building from Wayzata Boulevard and the drive-through? Or
I
should I
would
wait
have
till
to
the
dig into a previous packet, but maybe the applicant knows too.
Okay, thank you.
Do you happen to know, is it okay?
Yes. Commissioner Schwalbe, please speak.
Thank you. Where the mechanical is located in the current building?
That
Do
is
we
a
know that?
great question. I'm not sure.
I just wondered if that's something that
The
you would
applicant
have
will-
expected to be within the building, housed within the actual building. And was it a surprise for you to get this? It was sort of a surprise when I saw it. I thought we had pretty much gone through everything before. It's really like a last-minute change that is kind of a big deal, you know, where you're going to put your mechanical stuff. So I will ask the applicant where the mechanical is located in the current building, and when they came up with the plan before, where they had been anticipating it. Yeah, I guess that's all I have for right now.
Okay.
I have a couple questions, if you don't mind. Sure. Sort of along the lines, I think, of what Commissioner Douglas asked was, the initial proposal that we saw last year, was there a height variance? And did they go over that height variance, or did we give a height variance? Do you recall?
Yes, so the height variance for the original proposal was just for the residential building.
Okay.
The one building that we're not talking about here.
Got it.
And I will note that one of the conditions as part of the resolution that the council put together for that one was that there shouldn't be anything else that comes above the variance height that was enabled for that building. And as I understand it, there aren't any future deviations anticipated for that building, but that's also considered a later phase of the project as well.
Okay, okay. And then, just out of curiosity, why wouldn't the mechanical equipment have been factored into the original proposal? So again, sort of another similar question, but is that something that would typically be in the initial proposal that we're going to be evaluating? Or I guess, why are we seeing it now?
It's a good question. I know that at the time, as you remember, there were a lot of requests. I bet you remember it very
Yeah.
well, floating around trying to get approved. And I think part of the discussion at the time was that there's a lot of architectural details to work out right after we get these approvals, and as we understand what the limitations might be placed upon it, whether that's through Planning Commission recommendations of conditions or final City Council conditions. What staff understood at the time was that whatever mechanical equipment would be proposed would comply with the standards, and given that this was such a substantial project, we decided to go with that at the time.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further questions of staff, I'd like to invite the applicant to speak at this time. Please come forward and address the commission, state your name and address for the record, and give the role if you're an advisor or other part of the team. If possible, please keep your commentary to as close as 10 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll be shorter than that. I'm Matt Methune, 465 Bovee Road in Wayzata. I'm the developer, part of the team. I will answer the questions. I just have a few prepared remarks, which I'll go through, and then I wrote down your questions, and I'll invite the architect up, and we can go through them. So, thank you for your time and consideration again. A quick recap of how we got here. Language was added to the code a little over 2 years ago, restricting rooftop units to 9 square feet, 3 feet in height, and no more than 25% of the total surface area of the roof. It appears that we are the first applicable project to be proposed on Wayzata Boulevard since the language was adopted. I think it's fair to say that everyone at our June and July Planning Commission and City Council meetings either wasn't aware of the specifics of the language or didn't know the language would be impossible to achieve. Otherwise would imply that the plan was approved only to see it fail, which I don't think anyone in this room would do. This summer marks 3 years that we've been working on this plan with particular effort and resources having been put into the project since gaining approval 9 months ago. A few months ago, while working toward final permit, our commercial architect, Tannick, who's here tonight, saw this language in the code, realizing the impracticability of the two components, height and square feet. For those not familiar with mechanicals, 3 feet in height and 9 square feet would be appropriate dimensions for a modestly sized single-family home. We've researched all available units, and there are none that comply for a commercial structure of this size or anything close to this size. But it is noteworthy that the third component, percent of rooftop, we easily comply with at only 3% of the allowed 25%. That language makes complete sense. And interestingly, if we complied with the 3 feet in height and the 9 square feet and the 25%, we'd be at 513 units, individual units on the roof, which nobody wants. Tannick, the architect, upon finding this language, immediately raised the issue with the city, and we were hopeful that we could move forward with an administrative amendment, as our plan was to break ground on April 3rd. But we were told we'd need to go through the city approval process again. Please keep in mind our office building does not require any other deviations, CUPs, or flexibility from the code. In case it's not already clear, our situation is very different from the cell tower building nearby, and we feel that it's important to put any fears or comparisons to rest. As planned all along, pedestrians and drivers will not see the rooftop units because of our 42-inch parapet, and it's only the residents of our own development that would have a view. But we now plan to shield an eye-level view with screening immediately around the units as well. The only alternative would involve units at ground level for everyone to see and hear instead of the beautiful landscaping that is planned now. But after lengthy research and many conversations with our tenants, including our main tenant that we've been working alongside for nearly 3 years, this plan would not work. And it has become clear that the plan in front of you with RTUs is the only viable path forward for this project. So the decision in front of you is approval of the project with the RTUs out of eye and earshot, as has been planned all along, or killing the project altogether and leaving the site as is. As a proud resident of Wayzata, interested in the city's progress and enhancement, I hope you choose the former, and this project can continue to move forward. Thank you. Would you like me to address the questions now, or I think Tannick, the architect, would like to say a few things, if they could do that and then address your questions?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners. It's Nat Shea with Tannick Architects, and we appreciate your consideration again tonight. I know it's difficult in terms of the timing. I think the first thing I would address is our initial design concept always planned for a 42-inch parapet, which we always planned would screen everything. So all along this process, that was our intention, and I think we didn't see this language and the design standards that conflicted with other parts of the code that allowed for our building height. So we always maintained a height for the overall building that was below our required building height, and then this additional screening, which is not part of the specific code, adding this 42-inch high parapet. I think all along our vision has been to keep the ground plane clear, addressing so many of the other design standards in terms of pathways, outdoor spaces, connectivity through the site. All those things would be jeopardized with other mechanical solutions, which Matt touched upon in terms of outdoor cooling systems. The current building, as part of one of your questions, I believe, has those big giant compressors outside. We would have no location to put such things, which, well, we could put them outside and on the ground plane, but they would destroy everything that we've worked towards in terms of creating this great outdoor space. Our site is also unique, and in terms of, comparison, we're basically a four-sided building. So as you imagine how we've engaged pedestrians from every angle, any place you would put this additional equipment would really take away from what is, I think, the overall goal of the design standards, is to make these great spaces that are engaging to the neighborhood, engaging to the people in our building, allowing pathways through our property to the waterway. So I think all of those are the considerations that, as we come back to you today to ask for this, is to really see the overall vision of the project and understand that when you look at the scale of what we're asking for on this roof, hidden from every possible view, and especially since we're on the top of the hill, again, hidden from anyone from below us, I hope that we demonstrate our commitment to a great project and that you consider that for this project. So.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Planning Commission. Megan Rogers on behalf of the Methuen team with Larkin Hoffman. And I think now is a good time for me to address some of those findings that your staff have requested you to make in considering this project, and for us to talk a little bit about why we believe this application is appropriate based upon these specific facts and circumstances. So Matt and Nat have addressed these technical aspects of our application, and deviations from your design standards are appropriate where you can find that the negative impact of the deviation is outweighed by one or more of the factors outlined by the ordinance. And what we've shown you this evening, in particular based upon the view sheds that you have here, and what can be seen from the roadway and from the pedestrian viewpoint, is that there are no negative impacts to the proposed deviation. And staff has outlined these particular considerations for you within your packet here tonight. These design standards were born out of the city's comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan sets forth your guiding principles to increase walkability, provide more vibrant and open space, improve access to greater physical activity and health for the multi-generational community that you have here in Wayzata, pursuing a new focus on sustainability while maintaining the charm that's characterized Wayzata for generations and safeguards the health of Wayzata Bay. Now, this proposal achieves these blanket goals. First, the units are screened. They have no visual impact to the passerby, pedestrian, or driver. They allow for fully functioning open space, unmarred by the technical equipment at ground level. They enhance sustainability because they're highly efficient units. They're designed to ensure top air quality and ventilation systems for the residents and workers that will frequent these buildings. They conform with a majority of your code requirements. In particular, I think it's very important for you to focus on the context of that 25% rooftop coverage. These are at 3%, so you could have a much more significant visual impact as allowed by your code. And what we're doing is restricting that and seeking a deviation from it that's consistent with the rest of your ordinances. Now, during the design deviation conversation, your staff asked over 400 members of your community what charm is as part of the survey that was conducted in this entire planning process. And in response to the question for the Wayzata Boulevard district, they replied that for this district, it means commercial, it means active, it means vibrant. And furthermore, they demanded that your design standards reflect strong ground floor design. And that's what we presented to you last summer, and it's what this application maintains. It clears away what is otherwise categorized, I think, let's see, the design standard guide specifically says, mechanical equipment is a necessary evil. While it's governed by overlapping codes and regulations, applicants should make every effort to conceal large and bulky equipment from public view. And that's what we're requesting here, and that's what we think this project and this plan does. So you're asked a number of questions. You're asked, does the proposed rooftop mechanical equipment on each building fit the vision and policy of the comprehensive plan? It does. There's 3 goals for your 2040 plan that apply here. Number one, it creates a connected neighborhood that provides access to services, housing, and recreation for all ages and mobility types. Number two, it promotes a diversity of retail, office, and residential land uses at a high level of development quality to enhance Wayzata as a regional destination and provide services for the residents. And number three, it utilizes and supports sustainable development practices for public and private developments within the city. So as currently designed, the project dramatically enhances an underutilized pedestrian corridor connecting Wayzata Boulevard to Lake Street with new pedestrian walkways. And as a prosperous and renowned destination suburb, of course, Wayzata has taken a lead on enforcing its sustainability goals and objectives, including working to build a city free of visual and noise pollution. So the requested flexibility meets this goal and this objective. The proposed location and placement of the mechanicals will not disrupt your visual impact views to and from the lake, as your staff discussed earlier tonight. In building out the campus-style project, Methuen has thoughtfully looked for ways to ensure that every resident, office tenant, and client and bank branch customer are surrounded by aesthetically conscious spaces. But if you put these units on the ground, that creates noise pollution. It impacts the visual entire design of this four-sided project. And while in operation, these units then become not only virtually unnoticeable because of vision, but also because of the auditory impacts. An allowance of these units on the roof is directly in line with your comprehensive goals to reduce noise pollution and to encourage developers to utilize techniques and experience and equipment that minimize those impacts. Your staff also suggested that you examine whether the proposed impact or the proposed equipment on each building permits greater conformity with other code standards or policies. And it does, because as Matt detailed, this code allows for 25% rooftop coverage, and we are requesting 3% coverage. It preserves the visual beauty of these buildings, reduces that noise pollution, and that's what's core to these design standards. It's fostering and maintaining the charm that the city is known for, and removing these from any visual landscape, any visual impacts moves forward that policy goal. Staff also asked, does the proposed equipment on each building have a positive effect in the area? And I'd say it does for the same reason. The project will dramatically improve this property. It will enhance your pedestrian connectivity. And without this flexibility, the project simply cannot move forward. And finally, does the placement of the proposed equipment on the roof alleviate an undue burden? And it does. You know, while the fact is that a zoning standard that reflects aesthetic policy choices will not automatically invalidate otherwise valid ordinance, and cities do have broad authority to regulate development for the benefit of public health, safety, and welfare. There's no case law that suggests that a city can adopt and enforce standards for the sole purpose of aesthetic value alone, especially where there are reasonable alternatives that achieve the policy goals of the underlying ordinance. And what we've done is we've worked to bring you that. We don't have a commercially viable alternative. The testimony that you've heard tonight is that the architects have looked for any possible commercial unit that could provide the services needed for this office building and for the bank building that would comply with your ordinance. And there simply isn't one on the market. And so that's why we are here asking that of you this evening. And so to that end, you know, we ask that you recognize this necessary evil that's called out in your design standards workshop. And that we respectfully request that you grant the deviation request and certainly stand ready to answer any technical questions or provide any more information.
Great, thank you for that detailed account. Does anyone have any clarifying questions for the applicant?
Had you known ahead of time, if you had read the codes ahead of time, would you have been able to design things such that the mechanical could have been located on the property in the parking area or in another section? I realize it would have taken away probably some of your sellable or leasable space, but could it have been done?
I don't think, I'll answer quickly and then I'll let Nat, who will answer more intelligently. But the bank building, no, I don't think there would be an alternative. There's no basement. There's no extra space. So, and that one, the height is only, I think, 6 inches over the code. So no alternative for the bank building. The office building, potentially, you know, if we're starting over, we'd still have the condenser outside. And you had asked earlier about the existing mechanical. So there's a big chiller outside. So if you're on Superior and you pull into the back parking lot, the south one, there's a big chiller kind of between that nook there, between the drive-through and the building itself. So there's a big unit there. But yeah, so, you know, it would have completely disrupted the landscaping plan.
Okay.
I would just further that to say, if we would, the other systems are possible, but I think we wouldn't have had such a beautiful project, because this equipment, he talks about a chiller. These are big chillers, blasting nonstop. So no, I would say we've always imagined the equipment on the roof because it aesthetically, and given all the frontage we have on this property, I mean, that's the deciding factor here. We've really put together a beautiful project, and any other solution mechanically will take away from that in dramatic fashion, not in a little fashion, because again, I imagine our beautiful park that we created and these beautiful pedestrian walkways. In the middle of that could be a giant chiller, and if you've ever been near these, that's not a place that you want to be. So I would say, you know, there's no other alternative given the beauty of the site that we've created.
Commissioner Schwalbe?
There was a place in the city's presentation where they talked about a couple of buildings around there that would have a view of your rooftop, should this go through. I don't know that they would have a view of it right now, but if they ever changed hands and they were built, I think maybe the VFW was one of them, or the Legion. I don't know what the other property is. Do you see that as an issue?
Well, I think that's where we went above and beyond what I think the code required, is by screening the equipment now. So there is probably you'd have to be a 10-story building perhaps to be able to see down into our equipment, but even if you're level with us or above us, you're going to see finished metal material, very similar to the rest of our building. So without doing the height study and knowing exactly how high those units are, we've done a very substantial job of any visual in line with us or slightly above us, you would have, you know, very good screening. So it looks like an architectural element that's not dissimilar to the rest of the building.
And I just have one more question. Just looking at these renderings of the rooftops and the screening, it sure looks like a lot more than 3%, doesn't it?
It's amazing, and it is exactly 3%, and we actually did, though, a study, and Elisa actually did a diagram, which I would like to share with you, but it's so challenging. Mark mentioned the 513 units of 3x3s. Literally, you cannot get them onto this roof. So the code, if you actually took it at its word, would allow us to do, without any screening, 513 3x3 units on our roof. And so obviously that doesn't make sense, but that's why we're at 3%. And there's alternative within the code to not screen it and provide 513 units. Now that's not commercially viable. We've condensed it to these smaller units basically in order to achieve this. So it's a significant understanding of what aesthetically makes sense. That's what we're trying to achieve. But the code does allow for something that I think maybe it's unintended of that part of that code too. So I think there's some debate there perhaps.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the applicant? Commissioner Douglas?
I just had those two questions about the present Wells Fargo building height and the drive-through height. Just as a comparison, I'm curious.
Sure.
I don't think any the height studies are so difficult, as we know. I wouldn't know off the top of our head because of the grade planes, and I don't think we could answer that intelligently today. I know we had all of that at our fingertips the last time, but yeah, sorry.
It's the bank building, I think, is two-story there. The drive-through is lower than two-story.
Okay, so it's not dissimilar to our one-story and our two-story, because yeah, they're not dramatic. These two buildings basically on the same grade plane are very similar in terms of height. We probably have a little bit better, higher floor to floor, just because of modern design. But so we might be slightly taller just because of current design.
So you're saying across the street, there's that office building that's two-story. They might be able to see from their second story? They won't?
No, if they're standing at second level, they'll be looking just at our screening. So we have a 42-inch high parapet, which is already this high, and then our unit would sit here.
Okay.
So they'd see this much additional material above our parapet. And that's the beauty of our project, too. I think Mr. Methuen has spent more money building a 42-inch high beautiful parapet that's screening everything. So that's why from all of the vantage points, you have such there is no view of this because there's a huge investment in 42 inches of extra building all the way around. And then we also were intelligently placing these, and that was from the beginning, designing these in the middle of the building. We could have put them right on the edge, and then of course you'd see them all the time. So this has been intelligently designed to get them in the middle and have this extra high parapet to screen everything.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I will just add one thing, Commissioner Schwalbe. You asked, would we have done it, if we knew? And again, I don't think anyone understood the language ahead of time, obviously. But I don't know if this helps or hurts me right now, but I don't think I would have. Like this project, when I said, as a proud resident of Wayzata, I mean it. This project, it would have been much easier to keep the site as is. It cash flows very well, no risk. But, there's just so much opportunity for enhancement to that site, which I think you see. And so this project, I didn't want to cut corners. I didn't want to put huge units outside making noise for everyone to look at. So probably would not have.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right. Oh, Commissioner Severson has a question.
Yeah, can you just give me a sense of when you were designing the property, where was the mechanical equipment originally supposed to go?
We've always planned from day one that it would be on our roof.
Okay.
And that's why we did the 42-inch high parapets. I do remember in I believe it was the city council asked the direct question during our presentation, what are you doing? And we said, we have 42-inch high parapets to screen our equipment. No one asked another question after that. So that's why we were surprised to find this restrictive language in this kind of separate area. So it's always been our intention to put them in the middle, have an extra high parapet to screen it, and really maintain the beauty of the project. So.
Thank you. And also to maintain compliance with the height requirements that are associated with the building.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, if there's no further questions, I think we should turn to the public hearing. And before we begin with the public hearing, I'd like to make a few comments. The public hearing is a time for us to listen to you, our community, about the approval requests we're considering. It's an important part of our official process that allows the public to participate. Any questions asked during the public hearing will be held until the end of the hearing and may be addressed by staff at that point. With that said, I now open the public hearing for the address of this project, which is not on my screen, and it's 200 pages away.
900 Wayzata
900
Boulevard.
Wayzata.
Thank you.
Wayzata Gateway.
900 Wayzata Gateway. Okay, opening the public hearing. If you wish to speak, please come forward to the podium or raise your hand if you are on Zoom. State your name and your address for the record. Let us know if you're connected to the applicant in any way or are representing anyone else. Please. Thank you.
First of all, thanks to the planning commissioners for your service, and thanks to the city staff and Matt for answering my questions leading up to this meeting. My name is Henry Miles. My wife Victoria and I reside at 746 Widston Circle. To the Methune's project at 900 Wayzata Boulevard East, we have a direct line of sight from approximately the same elevation. That said, I'm here to support the requested variance. But in doing so, I want to share 3 observations about the process, Wayzata's building code, and precedent. First, the last time this development came up for public comment, a couple of us from Widston were here, and we spoke in favor of the project, believing we were looking at the final plans. Come to find out they weren't final, because they did not account for the out-of-code rooftop HVAC equipment. I have also learned that the city of Wayzata desires that such units be located at ground level inside the building or designed into the massing of the building instead of being placed directly on the rooftop. Understood. But I can also understand why a developer would prefer to put such equipment on the rooftop and not give up valuable footprint space down below or within a building. Secondly, I understand, I have not verified, that rooftop equipment of the scale required by the Methunes is not available on the market within the dimensions prescribed by Wayzata's building code. If so, Wayzata should modify its building code or make it more flexible. One way to do the latter would be, instead of specifying dimensions, to focus on aesthetics by requiring that such equipment not be visible from the hills or building tops surrounding the proposed development. Indeed, Matt Methune has represented to me in email that will be the case with his family's project. Thirdly, both by non-conforming dimensions and lack of aesthetics, the city of Wayzata has approved variance, a cup, near to the Methune's proposed project. I refer to the building at 800 Wayzata Boulevard East, on top of which sits a large, boxy, rooftop private cell tower that was not even needed, given the cell tower available at Wayzata Junior High School. If the city can permit such an ugly carbuncle at that location, it certainly can approve the request of the Methunes for their elegant design a little more than 100 yards down the road. So there you have it. Suboptimal process, illogical building code, precedent established, but all that notwithstanding, the promise for an impressive project of which, again, we are advocates. I ask that the staff submit these comments into the record for forwarding to the City Council. And I point out down below the footnote, which I'll mention in passing, that Wayzata has 4 cell towers by my count. For our population of 5,000 people, which is over twice as many cell towers per capita as in the US overall.
Thank you, Mr. Miles. Any other members of the public who wish to speak tonight? If none, Director Gelmer, do we have anybody on Zoom?
We do not, Chair.
Okay. Seeing that there's no one, I will close the public hearing. Commissioners, do we have any further questions?
Could I just ask the city a question?
Yes.
So given what we may have learned here about rooftop units, is it possible that the city will, if we have more construction down Wayzata Boulevard, need to take a look at that, those requirements?
I think it's possible that we would see requests from other applicants of commercial buildings in the corridor due to these restrictions. They are difficult to meet in our marketplace.
Okay.
I think we would see design solutions that the applicant presented, that alternatives that really aren't very good alternatives and impede on the pedestrian environment. This case particularly is a more difficult site because it has so many front yards to it. It may be more straightforward for some other properties on Wayzata Boulevard, but there's no doubt that this language is very restrictive.
Okay, thank you so much.
If any further questions?
I have a question. So, Dr. Galler, because it's so restrictive, does that mean that the intention is to have fewer rooftop mechanical equipments on Wayzata Boulevard? Is that the intention?
Yes, that is the intention at the time the design standards were written. We actually, before the design standards were updated, our standard just said that all mechanical equipment shall be completely screened behind a parapet wall and not visible to adjacent properties. So we actually made it more stringent by adding these size requirements.
Got it.
Okay, if there's no further questions, maybe we can open up for discussion amongst ourselves and where we're now, what we're thinking with all the information that we have received. Does anyone like to start? Commissioner Douglas?
When I saw this report, I went, 3 by 3, that's what I have in my backyard for a small townhome. It just doesn't make any sense. And I don't recall those discussions. I'm sorry about that. When the original application came, I remember we talked a lot about the townhouses where the mechanicals might go. But I don't remember the city having this discussion of a 3 by 3 for a commercial building. I think that's something that we need to direct somehow, who has that authority to direct staff to take a look at that.
I think, Chair, if other commissioners have similar comments, I can take, if I have a majority of commissioners feeling that this piece of code needs another look, I can bring that to the council. And if I have that majority from the council, that's sufficient direction.
That was going to be my suggestion.
Great.
In reading this through, I drove by and I looked at the 3 addresses you mentioned, and the only one that would be the second story of the current buildings of that office building, but you say that they won't see that, they'll be level. The apartment building is on that hill, and it's side-facing to Wayzata Boulevard. They only have 2 windows on Wayzata Boulevard. On the second floor, they're the only ones that would be impacted. And of course, the Legion is 1 story. But you hate to have to come back to these things, but I can understand the reasoning. It's a wonderful project. The one, I'm not concerned about the 6 inches. And I like the screening materials you're using. They're very high quality. And I would have no hesitation to approve this request.
Thank you, Commissioner Douglas. Anyone else have some comments and thoughts?
Well,
Commissioner Schwalbe?
I liked this project a lot when it was first presented to us, and I still like it a lot. I see a lot of value in having the mechanicals on the roof, and I've always liked all of the green space that you incorporated. So you answered my questions, and I still like your project.
Further discussion? Commissioner Sorensen?
Yeah, not to reiterate a whole lot, but I think in this case, we have a design standard that is extremely restrictive and almost necessitates a deviation or putting the equipment somewhere else. I mean, rooftop units for commercial buildings, especially of this size, are extremely common and standard, so it's reasonable to assume that I think there would have been RTUs on this building all along. I think it does make a difference. We're each site is different and specific as far as how we think about this. In this case, you're probably at or near the highest elevation of all of Wayzata Boulevard. And I think the real issue comes down to the visibility issue and how impactful that is to neighbors, pedestrians, people who live nearby. So we're kind of stuck, well, not stuck with, but we're here talking about, where's the best place to put this equipment or approve a deviation. And I think the team and the city's done a really good job exploring other options and explaining why, really, if you look at all 4 sites of this building at ground level or near it, there's going to be probably greater issues associated with this equipment being on the ground. So I think what we're doing here, approving a deviation, would comply with the intent of the comp plan. I think it's a great job for the city, and I'd be in favor of approving the deviation.
Thank you. I have some comment to add, which is that I was a member of the design standards. And I do recall addressing the mechanicals, and I recall that it's an interesting design standard because it's a inherently functional item that we're trying to make comply with design. So I know that it was looked at primarily by the consulting team that we had working with us. But it does seem that it's really important to have standards that, especially when addressing functional items within design, can be met to service the building. And I think that, you know, the way that these items are masked in the proposal here are very concise and neatly done. Whereas if we went ahead and met the actual design code, it would be a much broader array of units across the roof. So to me, it seems like a very obvious approval for all those reasons, and I would have no hesitation on doing so. And if that is where we are, maybe we can take a vote unless we have more comments or thoughts.
Nothing different.
Great. Can I have a motion from someone to, thank you. Commissioner Douglas?
The Planning Commission should direct staff to prepare a draft Planning Commission report and recommendations with appropriate findings, reflecting a recommendation of approval on the variance and conditional use permits requested in the application for 900 East Wayzata Boulevard for review and adoption at the next Planning Commission meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yep. And Chair, I think there's a typo in the staff report on that. Yeah, it's recommendation of the requested deviations
Oh, I'm sorry.
Deviations, yeah.
rather than the variance in CUP. Yeah.
Okay.
So if that amendment to your motion is okay, you can keep going.
Yes, that's fine. May I have a second?
Schwalbe?
Commissioner Schwalbe, thank you. Further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The motion passes. The draft report and recommendation will be on the consent agenda for our next meeting, and after adoption, will go on to City Council for their consideration. Thank you to the applicant, staff, and members of the public for participation in this item. Thank you. The first page. Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. And next on the agenda is the public hearing item. Consider the application for zoning text amendments to Chapter, oh, there it is, 936, Tree Preservation Ordinance, and Chapter 918, Fencing and Screening. Director Gellner, would you kindly walk us through this up?
Yes, I will pass it to Planner Keyser, and then also we have our city forester here, Bennett Myron, as well, for the presentation.
Thank you, Director Gellner, Chair and Commission. As Director Gellner said, I'm joined here by the City Forester, Bennett Myron, too, as well, to kind of walk us through some of the proposed changes, but I'll just kind of start it out and kind of wrap it up. So we'll kind of take team this presentation here. So again, this is for zoning text amendments to the Tree Preservation Ordinance, Chapter 936, and the Fencing and Screening Ordinance, which is Chapter 918. As you can see there on that slide as well. So a little bit of background as to how we got to this point. Some of the commissioners might have been here when we looked at the tree preservation ordinance last year, which was ultimately approved by the City Council in October of 2022. Since then, staff has worked to enforce and manage mainly the tree removal permits that you can see there as well with the tree preservation ordinance. So essentially, the tree removal permit went into effect in January of 2023, and since then we've been receiving applicants and issuing those permits. You can see since January 24th, which was kind of the first permit that we received, we have issued around 13 tree removal permits, and we've ultimately denied one tree removal permit. So really the reason that we're coming back to the Planning Commission and ultimately the City Council is to try to fix some items within the code to help us enforce and manage the tree preservation ordinance as we intended to throughout our conversations with the Planning Commission, Zoning Task Force, City Council, all those groups. So we have a few different proposed changes. The ones to Chapter 918 are more or less to try to get it in line with Chapter 936, which is the bulk and majority of the proposed changes that we did recently and this one as well. At the last time, we didn't necessarily look at Chapter 918 when we were looking at the tree preservation ordinance, so we wanted to get that one in line with the proposed changes. So with that, I will pass it to Forrester Myron for go over kind of the proposed changes.
Thank you. No.
Good evening. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
So a handful of things that we're trying to achieve here, most of which, like Nick said, are just kind of elaborating on standards and goals that we had in mind last time around back in October. A couple new things sprinkled in that we did not think of, and they kind of obscure items. But anyway, we've got so add clarification to heritage tree, which is a category of larger trees that receive different protection and replacement measures and standards. We want to clarify that a heritage tree must be healthy because in our ordinance, we say that any tree that is dead, dying, diseased, or hazardous is not subject to those same replacement thresholds. So a heritage tree is, like a significant tree, both of those categories should be considered healthy to qualify as such. And then that second point there, update the need for a tree removal permit to include any tree with a diameter of 6 inches or more. Really, the intention here is to receive more permits that might just apply to hazardous, dead, dying, diseased trees. The reason for that is that's really valuable information for us as we monitor the canopy that we have, because as pests and pathogens travel through the community, we want to know when these trees are dying, and usually those are going to be private trees. So when an application is submitted for such trees, more than likely, we're going to take a look at them and waive the fee. So this is not a money-making endeavor. We really want that data because it's really helpful in helping us determine, what changes we might need to make to our ordinance, what type of changes we need to make to our planting plans in response to different pests and pathogens that might be moving through the community. That third point is in reference to past tree removal. We discovered in the past few months that our ordinance currently reads that past tree removals are only considered when a new tree removal permit is being applied for. So it makes sense on paper, but unless it's worst case scenario, all the trees have already been removed, in which case the applicant does not need to apply for a tree removal permit because they're all already gone. So we want to prevent that from being an issue. So basically we're wanting to adjust the language to trigger that whenever any of these development type permits are being applied for. So anytime a building permit application comes in, basically, we're going to be looking at past tree removal, which, as time goes by and we continue with this tree removal permit process, that data should become more and more robust. How do I go ahead? So this is the one item that is might look foreign to you. This is a new definition in reference to structural root zone. Our current ordinance, and actually previous versions of our tree ordinance, refer to the critical root zone often, and the critical root zone is protected for the tree's sake. Construction damage in particular, compaction, excavation, which leads to root damage. We want to protect the critical root zone, again, for the sake of the tree. The structural root zone is really not about the tree. It's actually about avoiding hazards to the occupants of the property. So once you get inside the structural root zone, which is shown with that red triangle near the base of the tree, if that soil is compromised, that tree is inherently now hazardous. Yes, that will definitely affect the health of the tree, but in this case, we're almost not worried about the tree at this point. When it gets to be that extreme, we're worried about the tree falling over onto house, neighboring property, things like that. So we want to add language that would draw that distinction. If for some reason damage is done to that part of the root zone, we want to mandate removal. And that'll be factored into all the replacement calculations that they're already going through in the development process. But I think it's an important distinction to make. A few other things here. Remove the minimums for tree and plant size plantings. I think this is very important for a few reasons. One, the smaller size tree, or well, this is true for most plants, the smaller formats are actually easier to get established in the landscape. So I don't think we should discourage people from using, say, a 1-inch caliper tree versus a 3-inch caliper tree. There's been a lot of studies that actually show a bare root tree, which is usually pretty small, they call it a whip, and a ball and burlap tree, which is the larger format nursery grown trees. After about 20 years or so, they're about the same size. And that's because the bare root trees have such an easier establishment. There's less transplant shock. It's a healthier start to their life. So I think we want to embrace that. And also, I think it's worth mentioning that a lot of this has to do with replacing trees that were removed. Well, if they're going to choose to plant 1-inch trees instead of our current 3-inch minimum, they're actually planting a lot more trees than they would otherwise. So, I think that is something that I think we should embrace. Add language to prohibit certain species that are on the MDA's list of invasive, well, it's their noxious weed list, which is not just trees, that you'll find buckthorn and elderberry and stuff on there. But there are some trees there which we should not allow in town as far as proposed landscape plans go. That's not a list that we should codify, in my opinion. In the past, we had some reference to invasive species that we do not allow in landscape plans. We cannot respond very quickly. When there is a change to that list, we get a mailer from the MDA and it says, heads up, here are a few additions to the invasive species list. We want to be able to enforce that and keep people from planting them, and that would be very cumbersome for us to do with our own code. We need to reference some outside reputable agency like the MDA for stuff like that.
Yeah, so, and again, kind of to Forester Myron's points, Chapter 918, a lot of those changes were kind of already made in Chapter 936. The bulk of the tree preservation ordinance is more or less trying to fit and conform to what we changed previously in Chapter 918. So that's kind of a rundown of the proposed changes. Overall, staff obviously recommends approval to again protect, preserve, and enhance the natural environment of the community and to help us improve and maintain the enforcement of the tree preservation ordinance as intended. So some of the questions to consider: do the proposed text amendments fit with the 2040 comp plan? Do the proposed changes conform to the present and future land uses of the area? And do the proposed changes help protect, preserve, and enhance the natural environment of the community? So with that, I will pass back to Chair for any questions the commission might have for us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any clarifying questions this time? Yeah, Commissioner Douglas?
Only one question. Critical root zone, does that apply to coniferous and deciduous trees?
The critical root zone and structural root zones, yes, they both, it's a uniform formula regardless of species.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Commissioner Severson?
Just in general, when you've seen the applications, 14 of them have come in, what's been the general feedback that you're hearing from applicants?
Mixed. We've had to make certain tweaks to the application process. We're kind of figuring that out as we go, but we want to make it as easy as possible. This is something that I want it to take 5 minutes. You know, if we can achieve that, that'd be great. Just because, like I was alluding to earlier, we really value that information that we're getting from these permit applications. It really helps us maintain our own trees in a roundabout sort of way. So we've gotten, I make a point of asking each applicant, you know, how is the new process? What can we do to improve it? And we've gotten some good feedback, but overall, people they seem to be willing to participate, and so that's encouraging.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you. If there's no further questions, I think I need to turn to the public hearing. The same comments apply regarding the public hearing. So I'm not going to read all that again and simply open the public hearing. As there's nobody in the room tonight, is there anybody, Director Gellner, on Zoom this evening?
There is not.
Okay. If that's all, then if we have any comments or questions? Oh, and I forgot to close the public hearing, so I'll do that now. Okay, public hearing is now closed. Right. Do we have any further questions or discussion?
Comment? I just
Yeah.
think like, it seems like these are reasonable changes to be made. So I like them and support them.
Feels that way to me, too. That they're quite appropriate.
I think your mic's on.
Oh, microphone.
Commissioner Schwalme?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I feel that everything here, these steps are quite appropriate for what we're trying to do in the city with the canopy and to preserve and protect the trees that we already have.
Agreed? Agreed. Okay. I think we have consensus here. Is there a commissioner who would like to make a motion?
I will do that.
Commissioner Schwalbe?
I would like to make a motion that the Planning Commission direct staff to prepare a draft Planning Commission report and recommendation for review and adoption at the next Planning Commission meeting. Did I do it right?
It almost, Chair and Commissioner. Yeah, just, I think your recommendation is of approval of the proposed zoning text amendment.
Oh, I was just reading it right off of here. Did I?
But
Yeah.
is that true? You're recommending approval in your motion?
I am recommending approval.
Well, if you would accept that friendly amendment, I think you could proceed to ask for a second, Chair.
Yes, we'll accept that amendment. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Douglas. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion passes. The draft report recommendation will be on the consent agenda at our next meeting, and after adoption, we'll go on to the City Council for their consideration. Thank you to the Forester and staff for participating.
Nice job, Myron.
Awesome. Do we need a minute break, recess, or are we okay to continue? You good? Good. Okay. All right. This evening, we have our last item on the public hearing agenda, and that is to consider the application for conditional use permits for the municipal solar at 600 Rice Street East and 747 Mill Street East. Community Development Director Gellner, would you please walk us through?
Yes, I will have Planner Keiser provide the presentation tonight.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chair and Commission. So I'll be going through this whole presentation here myself, this one. So again, this is for conditional use permits for the municipal rooftop solar project. So as Chair noted, there are two locations.
Okay.
That was a close one. We have two locations requesting conditional use permits. The first being 600 Rice Street East, which includes City Hall here, the fire station, and the library. They're all part of one parcel, which you'll see here in a second, so that it would be one conditional use permit. The second one being at 747 Mill Street East, which is the municipal bar and grill and liquor store building. So these are just aerial. I'll show some closer images here in a second, but just get a better idea of where these properties are located. Again, you can see City Hall, Fire Station, Library are all on that same block in that same parcel and PID. So they're all included in one. And then the municipal bar and grill are included in the same building there and same property. This is to start with the 600 Rice Street East. The zoning, it's institutional. You're all probably familiar exactly where it is since we're there right now. But to the north is institutional zoning. To the east is PUD, the Winston Townhomes. To the south, some other condominium buildings, and there's a commercial building just there on the corner as well. And then to the west is the North Lake Townhomes and the Rice Street Townhomes there as well. For land use, it's pretty similar. The guidance for it is institutional public, same with to the north of the same parts. To the east, it's medium density residential, same with the south, along with some central business district properties for those commercial properties. And then to the west is mixed use commercial residential and high density residential with those townhomes. For 747 Mill Street East, the zoning is C4B, Central Business District. To the south is a parking lot, but it's also C4D, C4B. There are some commercial buildings there as well, more to the west. And then there's the parking ramp just next to it, which is institutional. And then the Winston Townhomes to the north, which is PUD. Same with the promenade to the east there. And then the guidance, the land use for it is Central Business District. Same with the south, along there on Lake Street. And then the Winston Townhomes to the north is medium density residential, downtown mixed use district to the east there with the promenade. So I'll show a zoomed in version of this here on the next slide, but this is, again, the design districts, and this is important because in the new solar ordinance that we put together, we use the design districts as a marker to tell us when potential solar projects like this would need a CUP. So within the Bluff District, any commercial building that is looking to do rooftop solar would need a conditional use permit. So you can see the two properties here that are laid out in those design districts are both fall into the Bluff District as marked now. We can go into that a little bit later on too. So this is a zoomed in version of that, of those aerial images. Just a few things to note, maybe for the 600 Rice Street building, more so towards topography. You can't really see it on the aerial too well, but from the northeast corner, it goes down in topography to the kind of southwest corner. There's pretty significant topography change as you get more south. And then for the Muni and liquor store, there is significant topography increase as you go more north towards those Winston Townhomes. So I just thought that was an important note with when we're talking about rooftop equipment, as we kind of discussed earlier tonight. So kind of backing up a little bit, some more background as to how we got to this point. Essentially, the agreement that we proposed to the city council with Blue Horizon, which is the solar installer, was actually approved by the city council last year. But since then, the solar ordinance was put together and approved by the city council. So now we have to come back for a conditional use permit in accordance with that solar ordinance. So we're kind of doing a little backwards here, but essentially the E&E committee looked at, since about 2020, so a few years now, looked at ways that city facilities could incorporate renewable energy into their buildings, whether it be rooftop solar or perhaps some subscription-based solar opportunities. And ultimately, they came forward with the proposal from Blue Horizon. They took a look at around 3 rooftop solar proposals and had different iterations of those. And they brought forward the Blue Horizon energy proposal based on the financial models that were being proposed, the experience and knowledge of staff. They're pretty close by, their location, and their kind of commitment to the Wayzata community through our discussions with that. And I think I'll touch on that picture later on. I think I added it again. So the reasons the E&E committee brought this type of proposal forward, in their mindset, the first, to produce sustainable energy. Next, to become a community leader in sustainability through potentially educational opportunities, as I noted there as well, by folks seeing solar on the rooftops. Reduce the city's carbon footprint, diversifying the energy supply, and cost savings, which was kind of an important element when we originally went to the city council and had those types of discussions. So the project itself, kind of noted, rooftop solar will be on City Hall, library, fire station, public works, and the Muni liquor store. Now you notice there in that sentence, we added public works. There is a proposed solar project for the public works building as well, but that is outside the Bluff district, so it doesn't need a conditional use permit request here tonight or application. The total cost of the installations for all the solar installations, so including the public works building, is just over $650,000. The net savings over 25-year lifespan is just over $850,000, and net present value of $330,000. Approximately a third of the total energy usage of these buildings would be offset by the solar production based on the solar installations proposed. And ultimately, the proposed installation date would be summer, fall timeline, if approved. I'll just go quickly through some images here, just to get a better idea of where the proposed installations would be on the rooftops themselves. So for City Hall, this image shows the City Hall installation. You can note that the installations aren't proposed on the community room roof, just the kind of flat roof outside this community room. Fire station solar system, mainly it's kind of got 3 separate rooftops there proposed on each of those rooftops. You can also note, I think in one of the plans it notes the setbacks too. All these setbacks or panels are going to be set back 3 to 4 feet from the rooftop edge, mainly for building code purposes in that way, but I just want to note that too. This is the library solar system. You can see it's not proposed on the east side there, and that is mainly because there's a large tree that provides shade on that section of the roof, so we want to have the most kind of efficient panels as possible, so we didn't propose those in that location. And then the Muni liquor store solar system. So you can see, okay, yeah, this one shows a little bit more, that 4 feet setback there. But for the Muni liquor store system, it's proposed pretty much every area of the rooftop, the south-facing rooftop. This Muni liquor store has kind of a combination of flat roofs and pitched roofs. So it'll be a combination of those types of systems, which you can see as an image here is how the flat roof sections, pretty much every roof system besides the Muni liquor store, the pitched roof areas would be this type of ballasted system. So there's no need for any roof penetrations or anything with these types of systems. The only ones that would require a roof penetration are those pitched roofs at the Muni liquor store. So all the other ones would be this type of ballasted system that are weighted down on the roof, and obviously a lot easier to move if need be. So the images I added earlier, I put them back here too. Blue Horizon gave us a contact for City of Morris that actually did a pretty similar project that we're proposing here. The image on the right is actually their liquor store, their municipal liquor store that they put solar on. And I can't remember exactly what the other building is, but that's another municipal building that they have there. So I thought this was helpful to give a little bit more context of how those systems would look on the different types of buildings that we're proposing. I did take some images from the right-of-way to get a better idea of maybe if you could see the rooftops or where the solar locations would be. Again, this is from the right-of-way, so it's not elevated at any point in any building. So you could see probably the most visible one would be the Muni liquor store, especially on the pitch roof areas. And then mainly the 600 Rice Street location. Like I said, it starts to taper down topography-wise as you go more south. There might be some areas that you could see them from different elevated positions just up around 600 Rice Street, but most likely not from the right-of-way. So that's a quick rundown. So ultimately, staff and the E&E committee do recommend approval of the CUPs as we originally had with the agreement with Blue Horizon. We believe that this would fit with the 2040 comp plan, especially the environmental sustainability guiding principle, which really lists that Wayzata should take a lead on sustainability goals and objectives. So some of the questions to consider: do the CUPs fit with the city's 2040 comp plan? Do the proposed changes conform to present and future land uses of the area? And does the project create any adverse effects on the area? The city also did conform to its own mailing requirements, so we did mail information about the projects within 500 feet of both the properties, and we have not received any comments as of yet on the project. So with that, I'll bring it back to Chair and Commission for any questions you might have of me.
Thank you. Do we have any clarifying questions at this point before we go to public hearing? Commissioner Douglas?
Yeah, could you go back to the City Hall one? I'm confused.
Sure.
You show the fire station. And is that just that part of City Hall?
Correct.
Okay, because you show a parking lot here.
Put that down here.
So there is a parking lot to the, kind of to the south, just,
Oh, okay.
which is essentially the
okay.
police parking lot.
And then one other quick question. On page 206, 9, and 12 of our packet, you show, what is a transformer in those diagrams? Is that a loud machine that, I'm concerned about the neighbors just across the street from that?
Yeah, Commissioner Douglas, that's a good question. So we've done some walkthroughs of these buildings with the electrical engineers. Pretty much all the equipment would be, or connections would be inside the building where our current electricity components are right now. The one things that would be outside are essentially kind of like turn-off switches, especially for folks if there's a fire emergency or something like that. You need to cut off electricity to the panels themselves if there's some on the roof. So that would be the one thing that's going to be outside, and then we would try to put as much of the connections or any other things inside as we can. There might be some additional components outside, but we would either put them where the existing electrical is that is more or less hidden.
So they don't create a lot of noise then? Okay, that was my only concern. Thank you.
Great.
I have a comment.
Commissioner Schwalbe?
I'm a little surprised, looking at the picture of the Morris Liquor Store, because it also has a pitch on it, just like our Muni does. And it really stands out, doesn't it? I mean, I don't have any issue with it on flat surfaces at all, and it's not that I really have an issue with that, other than the Muni is part of our Lake Street area that has a lot more people going past it than does the area up here. Maybe we could do that last.
Yeah,
I don't
Commissioner.
know, I'm just surprised.
Yeah.
I didn't expect it to be so dramatic.
Yeah, Commissioner, and I kind of expect that would come up, especially through our past discussions with the solar ordinance and everything too. And again, I think this really started with Energy Environment Committee, and their perspective was, try to get as much traction with this as possible, and create the most energy, obviously, as possible. So I think that was one of the main reasons to pursue the pitched roofs on the Muni liquor store, was to have that actually view of the solar panels. But I did expect that would be a question that would come up throughout this.
And where will it be most visible up here?
So,
I know there's a little bit of a pitch on, is it the library?
yep, exactly. So the one that does have a pitch here at the 600 Rice Street block would be the library, which you can see. It is a dark roof structure there, so as well, but you can still probably see, which maybe the right-of-way picture might show as well. If I can find the right.
It has a darker roof, are you saying, already?
Yes.
Darker
Okay, maybe you can't see it
asphalt?
from the image there, but it's kind of similar to the
Oh.
City Hall pitched roof there, which we're not proposing to put on that one, but
Yeah,
same kind of style.
okay. And the Muni's is much lighter. It looks like it's more of an existing gray roof.
Yep.
Is it possible to do that? Start construction up here and,
If there's consensus and approval that way, I mean, we could certainly pick certain installations to put in as opposed to other installations.
no, I don't know what anybody else thinks. It's not that big of a deal, I guess, but.
We're going to have a discussion after the public hearing, and we can
Oh,
go over that a bit more for sure.
okay.
Yeah, no problem. But then if there's no further clarifying questions, then I would like to open the public hearing. Okay, the same public hearing comments apply. I'm going to now open the public hearing for the Lake Street Solar. Seeing as there's nobody in the room, is there anybody on Zoom?
There is not, Chair.
Okay, great. Then I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. All right. So now's a good time for Commissioner Schwalbe to address that question and any other items of discussion.
Well, I guess I was just wondering if anyone else noticed what a big effect it has on a pitched roof. They are very dark. And of course, on the photograph that we saw of the liquor store in Morris, they have a very light roof, so it's even more dramatic. And not unlike our Muni.
Is our Muni roof that light? I know the building has two different colors, but I can't remember the roof.
Yeah, Commissioner, you can kind of.
There it is.
Yeah, kind of see
It's
in
a
this
little
image here,
darker, yeah.
the color of it.
Yeah.
Probably wouldn't be such a big impact on the liquor store side. That has a darker roof. It's purely aesthetic, it's,
I would have had the same feeling a few months ago when we started down this road. I had a lot of issues about solar and the appearance and all of that. And then I started driving around our neighborhoods and saw how many homes have solar on these beautiful $3 million homes, and they're the dark panels. And in Florida, I was noticing it when I was down there, of all places. Why do they have solar? But anyway.
The sun.
Yeah, but I mean, they don't have to heat like we do. But anyway, but as time goes along, I'm becoming more and more concerned about our environment and the needs. We hear things daily, how things are changing more rapidly than we all anticipated, I think. And I think I said this to Nick the other day, maybe it's time for the city to set the model for what the community should look at. And I know my church is looking at it to face Highway 12, you know, that side of the church. And they'll probably be coming before us, but I think it's probably where we're going in our future. And maybe I have to get over it. So.
Thank you. Further discussion? Commissioner Sorensen?
So are municipal buildings treated any differently than private buildings in the solar ordinance?
No, we kind of combined institutional and commercial with as
So if I understand kind of where we're at is, late last year, the city entered agreement with Blue Horizon to purchase and install this equipment, right?
correct.
And then the new solar ordinance, which came earlier this year, said in the Bluff District, you need a CUP to install rooftop solar.
Correct.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be here, right? I mean,
Correct. Yeah.
we just put it on.
Essentially, we did not approve any building permit to put it on yet.
Yeah.
So
What is it?
while reviewing the building permit, we need to review it with the most updated ordinances.
Kind of an unusual situation here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the only possible adverse effect that people may have is the visual impact on the muni. And we don't allow solar on Lake Street, right? This isn't on Lake Street, but it's right across the parking lot, so it's a little in between. So you're,
Just off Main Street.
yeah, so I think you have that issue that you need to be careful with. I think, personally, I'm not that enthused about it on the muni, but I kind of tend to agree with you.
I know. And it is Mill Street.
Yeah, so,
Right.
thanks for clarifying.
Commissioner Searson?
No, I think it's great. I think it's moving in the right direction. I agree with Commissioner Douglas. You drive around neighborhoods and a lot of homes are having solar like right there on the front part of the house. It's just sort of becoming part of what we're going to see, I think, more and more so. So I supportive.
Wonderful. I think it sounds like we have consensus. And as such, is there someone who would like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion tonight. I would make a recommendation to direct, Planning Commission makes a motion to direct staff to prepare a draft Planning Commission report and recommendations with approval on the application for the CUP on the solar panels for the Wayzata municipal buildings for review and adoption at the next Planning Commission meeting.
Correct, and just with it, I'll state the address. It's the municipal solar at 600 Rice Street East and 747 Mill Street East.
Thank you. How'd I do?
Combined,
Yep.
combined
I'm
effort.
good, I'm good, all right.
Awesome. Wonderful, thank you. May we have a second?
I second Schwalbe.
Thank you, Commissioner Schwalbe. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The motion passes. The draft report and recommendation will be on the consent agenda at our next meeting. After adoption, we'll go on to City Council for their consideration. Thank you. Thank you to the city for all that work. Okay. We'll go over to other items. We have two items on the other items section. First is the review of development activities. Director Gellner, do you have some updates?
Yes, I have one update for you. At our meeting on May 1st, we will have one public hearing for 200 Lake Street. It's a mixed-use development. The project plans are on the website. You can view those now. And also, there will be a neighborhood meeting for this project on Monday, April 24th at 5:15 in this room, hosted by the applicant.
Can you remind me what's 200 Lake Street?
The former TCF
TCF.
headquarters.
That's what I thought.
The cards came in the mail today to our.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
Perfect.
And the notice was sent out to a periphery of 750 feet, so quite a lot of those invitations went out. That's my only update, and then our meeting schedule stays the
Same.
same as usual. Yep.
Okay, great. Well, I think that concludes this evening's meeting, and I'd like to adjourn. Thank you for everyone for participating. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Douglas.
Thank you, Commissioner Douglas. A second.
Severson, second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The motion passes, and the Monday, April 17th, 2023 Wayzata Planning Commission meeting is adjourned.